Hi, welcome to 1080 Passport, your weekly-ish look at the world of international Blu-ray releases. I'm your host, Darrell Hodges. I'm the owner of Foreign Exchange Blu-Ray Imports. It's a shop in Culver City, California that sells import Blu-ray discs. Our first segment this week is something I'm calling On the Horizon, where we take a look at some releases that have been announced but are still on the way. The first topic, actually heard about it from Ryan Gallagher, who used to do the Off the Shelf podcast, if you're a fan of that. Turns out that apparently Steven Soderbergh's The Limey has been announced for a French release. This is a very exciting development because this is a title that is probably one of the most desired releases on 1080p Blu-ray. It got a domestic DVD release like probably almost 20 years ago, but it never has made the jump to Blu-ray yet. I know a few months ago Soderbergh had mentioned that he was wanting to have all of his films restored in 4K and eventually released. And I did notice that on the image that Ryan posted, it did say in French on there that this was going to be from a new restoration. So obviously, as is often the case with French releases, hopefully it's not an issue where there's forced French subtitles. But if it turns out that it's actually an English friendly release, that's a very exciting development for fans of Soderbergh. For our next title that's on the horizon, Network in the UK has announced that they're going to be releasing season 1 of the Aziz Ansari series Master of None. Folks in the United States might be thinking, hey, wait, isn't that a Netflix original? I thought Netflix originals didn't typically get released on Blu-ray. And the fact is that's true. They generally, it's not common for them to get Blu-ray releases, and when it does happen, a lot of times it's in other territories. Some titles that have shown up overseas that were in America, we think of them as Netflix movies, even though they weren't necessarily produced by Netflix, but they were released by them, are things like there was a sequel to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon that was released on 3D Blu-ray in Hong Kong. Alicia Rohrwacher's Happy as Lazzaro has gotten an Italian release, and recently there was an announcement that it's getting a German release. Also, On Body and Soul by Ildiko and Yeti. That's another title that has been released in Germany and in Hong Kong, and apparently the Hong Kong release is English friendly. So we are starting to see titles that we think of as Netflix movies or Netflix shows popping up in other territories. I think this is a good sign because I know there was a lot of consternation about, are we ever going to get a chance to buy The Other Side of the Wind or The Ballad of Buster Scruggs? I definitely say that the people that are hoping for that to happen probably going to look at this and take it as a good sign. Granted, it's just speculation on our part, but it is something to give us hope. Our next item in the On the Horizon section isn't really so much news, but since this is the first episode of this new reboot of the series, I felt it was worth mentioning in case some folks watching hadn't heard. There's a German label called Turbine Media that announced back in January that they were working on a 4K restoration of David Cronenberg's Crash. This is another title that's very highly sought after. To my knowledge, it has not been released on Blu-ray to this point. So this is something that's of keen interest to quite a lot of people. They haven't given an announcement date, and judging from the thread at Blu-ray.com where a person from Turbine posts, they do seem open to the idea of, at least theoretically, also doing a UHD release. There's been a lot of comments in the thread from folks who are definitely expressing an interest in a UHD release if that happens. But for those who are just looking to do 1080p release, it looks like that's going to happen at some point. So that's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. If you're not familiar with Turbine Media, they've done releases of titles such as Tony Scott's The Fan, They recently did a version of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, which is the first time that we've seen a Blu-ray that attempts to sort of restore the original theatrical color timing, or at least to give it a presentation that more closely resembles what we saw theatrically. So they're a very exciting label. A lot of times they'll start out by doing a media book or then doing a steel book, and then, you know, as things go, at some point you'll get a price down reissue, and at that point you can get some really great deals on some titles that are very highly anticipated. For the last On the Horizon topic for this week, I wanted to talk about Kino's Kanopy connection. For those of you who might not be familiar with Kanopy, and that's with a K, it's a streaming site that originated out of Australia, and you don't have to subscribe to it. Actually, it works based on your library card. For instance, if you have a library card for the Los Angeles Public Library, you can stream up to 10 movies a month, and it's free. A lot of boutique labels have licensed their films to be available on Kanopy, and one such label is Kino Lorber. One thing that's kind of interesting is that on Blu-ray.com, there's a person who works for Kino Lorber who posts, and in the past few weeks, he's talked a lot about a deal that they did with Studio Canal, and he hints at certain titles that are coming. So that's a really good resource to kind of keep tabs on which of the Studio Canal releases are ending up where. But within the last week or two, a few of the titles from the deal have showed up on Kanopy, and some people, including myself, asked the Kino Lorber Insider, "Is this just a streaming only deal, or are these titles actually coming to Blu-ray?" And he confirmed that the ones that had popped up on Kanopy were coming at some point to Blu-ray. So this is a very exciting development, and there's a lot of great titles like Carol Reed's The Man Between, and Death in the Garden by Louis Buñuel, Touché Pas Grisby, the great French gangster film. There's probably been at least 8 to 10 titles that have popped up on Kanopy and that they have subsequently confirmed prior to actually announcing them, either through an official press release or in the thread. So that's a very exciting development, and it's just something good to kind of keep an eye on to get an idea of what's coming.